All right, welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 16. Again, I want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 16. We are in Chapter 16, verse 1. That's where we've been last number of weeks, going through the sin or potential sin, anyway, of the death of the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu. Again, I want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 16, verse 1, where we've been for the last number of weeks. And I want to finish up. We're going through this Orchaim Akadosh, which is kind of long, which hopefully we're going to finish up today. And speaking about potential sin, it was a sin at some level, what Nadav and Avihu did, right, in order to warrant the death penalty. We saw a number of possible explanations, and the Orchaim then says that it's all according to one of the commentaries that explains Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. Remember, Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, Rashi quoted, that said that after the death of the sons of Aaron, there was a parable. What can it be compared to? To a doctor who's going to treat a patient, right? The doctor says, don't eat cold foods, don't lie in a damp, chilly place. Another doctor comes and says, don't eat cold food, don't lie in a damp, chilly place, so that you will not die the way so-and-so died. The second doctor browsed and follows instructions more than the first, right? Because he said the same thing, except don't do what so-and-so did because he died. Right? And that's why it says after the death of the two sons, right, of Aaron. So whatever, we had a number of interesting questions on that Rashi. But the Orchaim Akadosh continues, and he says, okay, we see what Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah said. We see what he said over here. And he said there are three types of warning. Right? He said there are three types of warning over here. Or let's say better. There are three warnings. Right? It says, Orchaim Akadosh, one is that they were warned, not to eat something cold. They were warned, don't eat something cold, so you don't die. And the third thing was that they were warned that don't eat something cold lest you die like so-and-so died. Right? So God said for these three things, he said God spoke to Aaron, don't go in whatever you want. That's the second verse, which we might actually get to today. We'll see. Second thing is, don't come anytime you want to the Holy of Holies so you don't die. And it corresponds to the third thing after the death of the sons of Aaron, that they shouldn't die. All right, so now comes along the Orchaim Akadosh. And the Orchaim Akadosh says, okay, I get three warnings. Three warnings that Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah tells, right over here. As we saw from Rashi. So now, what have we been trying to do up until this point? We're trying to answer exactly what's going on. What's going on in this Rashi, in this whole parable with Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah? Because remember, we spoke about the idea that at some level, he's liable for the death penalty. Really, Aaron is liable for the death penalty for what? For the sin of the golden calf. Problem is, the sin of the golden calf is not mentioned explicitly. That we're going to have to deal with. All right, that we're going to get to. So the Orchaim Akadosh here says, I'm trying to answer up, or let's say better, his commentary, their aim, is trying to answer up for Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. Answer up the verses. Right? Because remember, the verses over here don't belong here. The verse over here, let's say better. The verse over here the one we're dealing with, belongs in Leviticus chapter 10, right? When it talks about the death of the sons of Aaron, right? It doesn't really belong over here, right? There's the whole question we've spoken about what exactly it's doing over here, in the next verse as well, which again, which we'll get to hopefully. So he says the following. Says the Or Chaim Akadosh, and he goes explaining this Re'im, trying to explain or try to answer up what's going on with this explanation by Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. So he says, according to me, says the Re'im, according to me, Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah only came to teach you that what was the first thing that said? First thing that was said was that God spoke to Moshe that he should say this to Aaron, right? That's the first thing. That's the first thing that was said. In other words, if you transgress over here, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, like I told you, then God forbids you could die just like your sons died, right? So there's a divine command, right? There's a divine command over here. Divine command that God speaks to Moshe. Moshe is going to tell Aaron that if you do this, like your sons did, you could die. Right? So you shouldn't die like your sons died. Now, there's a question over here. Right? It says the Or Chaim, or really it's in the name of the Re'im, that he asked the question, what are we talking about? What command? Remember, it says by the Ber Shem El Moshe, God spoke to Moshe, Achrei Moshe b'nei Aaron, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, Kravosom, that they drew close with Hashem v'Yamus. They drew close to God and they died. Right? There's also a problem which we've spoken about. He already said, Torah already told me that they died. Two sons of Aaron died. So good, if the two sons of Aaron died, why do you have to tell me in the end they died? We already know that. Right? That we've also spoken about. But that's not the point. Point is, it says by the Ber Shem El Moshe. It says God spoke to Moshe. Well, what did he say? Don't know. Torah doesn't tell me. Torah does not tell me whatsoever what he said. What God said to Moshe. Right? So Or Chaim HaKadosh asks, or the Re'im asks, what's going on? Right? What are we talking about? What command? What command did God give? We don't see anything. Doesn't seem like he says anything. Right? The Torah is pretty ambiguous. Right? And not only that, not enough to say why he shouldn't die. From what? Right? That would be the obvious question. What am I worried about he's going to die from? God just says he's going to speak to Aaron after the death of the sons of Aaron, and that they died. Okay. What they died from? What's the connection? What did God say? We don't know anything. We know nothing over here. Then he says, oh, that's why we have the parable. We have the parable of the doctor, right? Like we explained before. Because the doctor's going to say to the sick person that you shouldn't die like this person died, right? It's much more of an arousement, so to speak, in order that the other person shouldn't die. Because you're going to tell them, okay, don't eat, right? The first thing is, don't eat this cold thing. And then he says, don't eat this cold thing like this person ate and died. Wow, that's a little more significant. It's one thing to get warned, you shouldn't eat this thing. Okay. It's another thing, to say, okay, if that's the case and you ate it, well, guess what? You could potentially die from it, right? That nobody wants. Certainly nobody wants. So there's a parable over here. Don't eat this thing like so-and-so did and died, right? So that's more of an arousement than the first one, than the first one. Because the first one's only told, don't eat this thing. You're not told anything else, right? He's not told that he's going to die from it. So when he's told, don't eat this thing like so-and-so died from it, that's more severe. right? Even more than the second one, the third one, because the second warning is don't eat it, you might die, right? The third warning is don't eat it because you might die like so-and-so died. That's worse, right? Certainly worse. That's why I have this parable here. Therefore, God gave an extra command. He gave an extra command to say, hey, don't do this like your sons, and that your sons died from this. Now, there's a fundamental question that we haven't asked yet, that the Or Chaim's now going to ask. What's the fundamental question here? Fundamental question is, we have Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, as Rashi explains, gives the parable, and seemingly he's giving the parable of three doctors. Right? The question is, or let's say better, each doctor says, okay, first one says, don't eat this cold thing. Second one says, don't eat this cold thing, you might die. Third one says, don't eat this cold thing, you might die, just like so-and-so died. It says the Or Chaim HaKadosh over here, we have a parable of three doctors. And each doctor is more fastidious than the other one. Because the first doctor says, again, he says, don't eat this cold thing. Okay. Second one's more fastidious, says, don't eat this cold thing so you don't die. Third one is even more fastidious. He says, don't eat this cold thing because not only you might die, but you might die like so-and-so. So that's worse, right? It goes up in level over here, right? So each one, so it says Or Chaim HaKadosh here, each one explains according to their level of fastidiousness, right? One says, shouldn't die, you shouldn't eat from it. Second one says, shouldn't eat from it, you might die. Third one says, shouldn't eat from it, you might die like so-and-so died. So that's worse, right? Each one going up in level over here of fastidiousness. So therefore, what is this verse? Who is verse 1 going like? It's going like the first doctor, second doctor, or the third doctor. Seems like it's going according to the third doctor, right? It says the Or Chaim HaKadosh. It's like it's going, according to the third one that says, don't do this like your two sons died. That's much more fastidious. That's much more of a warning, right? Let's say better. It's much more of a warning over here. Now, comes along the Re'em, who the Or Chaim HaKadosh brought in, and he asks like this. He says, according to what the Re'em said, what did the Re'em say? He brought in Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, and he said there are three types of warning. Okay, so according to what he said, the first warning for the first doctor, not similar to the second warning of the second doctor, not similar to the third warning of the third doctor. Because the first one and the second one, right, the first two doctors did not say, don't do this because you might die like so-and-so died. Only the third doctor said that, right? He warned, he gave a much greater warning. The first two, okay, first one says, don't do this. Second one says, you do, you might, so you shouldn't die. But the third one is a much greater warning than the other two. Right? Because what does he say? He says, don't do it, right? Lest you die like so-and-so. Right? So that is much more of a warning. But that's not what happened over here. If you look at what the Torah says, what did God say? Right? God only said the third one. God's going seemingly according in the parable to the third doctor. That don't do this because of like what your sons did because they died from it. So that's worse. That's a greater warning. So God doesn't, mince words over here, right? God doesn't say, oh, just don't do it. Or don't do it, you might die. Says don't do it because so-and-so died also. Your two sons, don't do it because what's going to happen to them? So seemingly God, in this case, in our verse, in the parable, is going according to the third dog. So now he says you got to force in over here what the Re'em says, and you have to explain over here that this is only going like one dog. That's what it seems like. that according to this parable, you have three different ways of looking at it, right? Three different doctors, right? But it's only going according to one, even though they added on the first time, they added on the second time, and the third one was much more severe, okay, right? But it's really all one parable. It's not, it's not three different things. It's all one parable within, within these three different doctrines. But there's another question, right? There's another question, another obvious question. And the question is, if you look at the parable, we got three doctrines, each one giving a greater warning than the other. Okay. Now, what would be the obvious question? What would be the obvious question here? The obvious question would be, guess what? Why do I need three doctors? Why don't you just tell me the parable, one doctor, one idea? Why are you telling me three different things? Seemingly three different things. I don't need three different things over here. Right? So he says, according to Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, the parable that he gives, it's not one thing, it's three different things, seemingly. Right? It's three different things. But and not only that, if God only gives one command, right? Also kind of hard to understand. God says, again, God spoke to Moshe saying, right? If you draw close before God, you'll die like the sons of Aaron. Right? Loose translation. So if that's only one thing, God's only saying one thing over here, seemingly. If he's only saying one thing, why do I need three doctors? What do I need this whole thing telling me? One doctor, second doctor, third doctor, tell me one. That's all the Torah tells me. Right? God tells me one command. Do not do like your sons did. Period. Right? That's his question. So it says if you go according to what the words are, right? Sorry, the way it's set up. According to the words of Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, we can go this way. We can still say it's not just one command. We can still split up this verse into three different things, three different warnings. How can we do that? So he says, first thing is, what does it say? Vaydaber. God spoke. God spoke. What did he say? Don't do this. Right? First warning, don't eat this. What's the second thing? One second. Then it says, after the death is the second thing, right? It's its own entity, so to speak. And then in verse 2 it says, don't come in whenever you want to the Holy of Holies. So you got three different things. Three different things within seemingly one verse, or part of the second verse also. Why? Why do I need the second verse? Because they drew too close. And that's why the sons died. Then he says, in the second thing, he says, I'm commanding you, don't come whenever you want. Right? You can't come whenever you want. You'll serve in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, in the temple, but you do what I'll say. You'll serve as I tell you what to do. God says. So he tries to fit it in, through breaking up the verse. He tries to put in over here that really the verse could go according to all three, even though it's all one. Right? So explains Or Chaim HaKadosh here. So the question is, as we said before, question's going to be, it's only one command. If it's only one command, I don't need a parable of three doctrines. Right? That's a simple question. So he says, if you break up the verse, I could break it up in three different ways. Three different statements. Three different statements will fit in. And if it fits in, very good. He puts that in, and that's how he's going to explain it. Otherwise it's got a problem. Very simple problem. The parable does not match up what's going on here. Right? I don't need three warnings over here. I don't need this parable to say it's 3 warnings? Why not just tell me it's all one thing? It's all one entity. Right? It's a little bit problematic. Right? So the Orach Chaim here says you can be forced in and explain it that it's all one thing with 3 different things going on. 3 different parts of the verse we could go through and explain according to Rebbe Elizabeth Nazari that way. But the problem is I don't need 3. I only need 1. I only need 1 doctor over here. I don't need 3. So he explains it going through the verse how you could actually answer up that. But then whatever, it's problematic. Right? Just pointing out here. It's problematic. So says Orach Chaim Mekadosh. Finally finished them up. Comes on the Rabbeinu B'chai. It's also a pretty long Rabbeinu B'chai, but a lot of it is just going through a whole bunch of other verses trying to explain certain things which we're not going to go through. I'll save you on that. So the Rabbeinu B'chai says that what's the reason they die? Simple explanation, because our verse says they came in front of God. They drew too close. Right? And that's why they died. And we're going to see the next verse. He's going to explain, the Ramban is going to explain. So he just says that this is what happens. And you have to see the Ramban. And we'll see the Ramban in the next verse. Right? I don't know if we're going to get to the next verse, hopefully. But if we don't get to the next verse, we'll see it next week. Right? We'll see this Ramban next week. Now, comes along the Rabbeinu B'chai. Rabbeinu B'chai says, first thing he says is, according to simple explanation. Right? We're going to try and explain this according to the simple explanation. He says, simple explanation is that there are 2 sins. 2 sins they have in their hands. Right? 2 sins going on over here. First of all, we're talking about where this decree made. The decree is made for their death. Right? The idea that there's a machshava, there's an idea, there's a thought over here that there's going to be a decree for death. Now, that necessarily means that the decree is going to be fulfilled. Not necessarily. It depends. It depends what God thinks over here. But that's the first thing. It dawned on God in his mind, whatever that means, that there should be death over here. That they should die. What's the second thing? Second thing is the action itself. The action itself. Whatever they did, again, number of things possibly, what they could have done, whatever they did, they're liable. Right? It was their action itself. So now, comes on the Rabbeinu B'chai. He says, okay, let's see. Let's see what's going on over here. What does it mean? What does it mean to sin by thoughts? Why would a person think? So let's just explain. By a Jew wouldn't necessarily apply to a non-Jew. In general, not even a JIT, right? Not even a Jew in training, right? A person usually will not get punished by their thoughts. Because normally we hold Devarim Shebalev Eino Devarim. Words in my heart are meaningless. Right? It doesn't matter what a person thinks in their heart, in general. Right? We'll explain further in a second. But in general, what I think doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have any effect. Doesn't have any effect. Because even if a person thought something in general, so what? He didn't verbalize it. By certain things, though, could be by charity. For example, charity is a good example. Let's say a person in their mind, they didn't say it, they didn't write it anywhere, but in their mind they said, I'm going to give X amount to charity. Or I want to give X amount to whatever. Now the question is that person liable to give it? Does he have an obligation over here to give it? Now, why would I say he doesn't? Because he didn't say anything. He didn't verbalize anything. Certainly didn't write anything down. Right? He didn't write a document, didn't have it signed, notarized, whatever. So if he doesn't have it written down, with witnesses, he doesn't sign it. He doesn't verbalize it, because verbalizing has a tremendous effect, right? Anyone saw my video on Parshas Truma, right? A person can make a statement on sticks and stones. Sticks and stones. Person dedicates, they say they're going to dedicate, X, Y, and Z to the temple, right? To the temple in Jerusalem, when it existed. Okay, fine. They dedicate it. Now, let's say once it's dedicated to the temple, they use it for everyday usage. So that's a Torah prohibition called Me'ilah. Me'ilah means I took something that was consecrated for the temple and I used it for everyday usage. Now, again, we don't have a temple today, so it's a different issue. But just pointing out that a person can take sticks and stones or plastic or who knows what, dedicated to the temple, and now what happens? Can't misuse it. It has to be used for holy things. If it's misused, that's a Torah prohibition. That Torah prohibition is called Me'ilah. So therefore, I could forbid something on myself by making a vow. Person could consecrate something with their mouth by saying this is going to go to the temple, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. So we see that our words have power. Our words absolutely have power here, right? Something we say, there can be sanctification. So we have to be careful. Very good. So why do I mention that? So I mention that because when a person says something, it's got power. Tremendous power. Lashon hara. God forbid a Jew speaks Lashon hara against someone else. Even if it does not affect them in a negative way. Even if 100% it does not affect them in a negative way, it doesn't matter. You've caused damage. Right? Even if it's true, even if everybody knows about it. If everybody knows about it, even if it's true, people say, what's transgression? What's the big deal? Everybody knows about it, right? It's all over the internet, it's all over the newspapers, but in fact, it's true. So what? Chofetz Chaim says that's still Lashon hara. I can't repeat it for any reason I want, right? I have to say it, under certain circumstances. I have to meet certain criteria. Just because everybody knows about it doesn't really matter. And even if whatever a person says, it's not going to cause the other person damage, doesn't matter. Still not a good thing to do, period. Still something that shouldn't be done. Okay, that's if I say something. So I can understand if I say something has tremendous effects, positive, negative, whatever it is, can have tremendous effect. I can sanctify something, whatever it is. Now, if I don't say anything and I think something. So for most things that a person thinks about, doesn't matter. If a person, for example, if a person thought in their mind, okay, I'm going to make, the person's going to make an offer on a house. And then on that house, person signs with someone else. Say, wait a minute. 2 weeks ago, I had in my mind, I was going to make you an offer. So what's the guy going to say? Did you make me an offer? No. Do you have a contract? No. Did you write me a letter? No. Send me an email? No. Didn't do anything. So thoughts in their head, irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. You didn't do it. Now, there are certain things that if a person thinks, even if they don't necessarily act on it, so that could be forbidden. There are a few things like that. One of them is idolatry. Right? Normally we say by idolatry, person either has to say, this is my God, or they're going to bow down to it, or they're going to sacrifice to it, or do a libation towards it. Right? There are certain things that a Jew is going to be obligated for idolatry. But if a person thinks in their mind, they didn't say anything. They didn't say one thing. They thought in their minds, short little fat guy, Mr. Buddha, or Mr. JC hanging up somewhere is my God. That's what they said in their mind. So again, what would I say? What do I care? Devarim shebalev ain't devarim. Words of my heart don't mean anything. But when it comes to idolatry, you're in trouble. You got to be careful what you think. When it comes to immorality, even if a person doesn't act on it, has certain thoughts, can also transgress. Just about by everything else, we don't say that. But there are certain things that are pretty severe, very, very severe. Even if you don't act on it, even if you don't talk about it, but it's in your mind, you transgress. You will transgress such a case. Good. So now, that was a way of introduction. Because now, what did the Rabbeinu Bachai here say? Rabbeinu Bachai said, there are two things going on over here. There's a sin in machshava, in thought. There's a sin in action. Sin in action, I can understand. Right? Sin in action can be any number of things that Nadav and Avihu potentially could have done. Right? What about the sin of thought? Says Rabbeinu Bachai, they came too close in front of God at Mount Sinai after Moshe already warned them. And that's why they're liable for a death penalty. What are we talking about? He said, that's what the rabbi of the blessed memory tell us. Brings down the Medrash. It brings down a verse in Book of Exodus, chapter 24, verse 11. Right? The Torah there says, Book of Exodus, chapter 24, verse 11. Against the great men of the children of Israel, he did not stretch out his hand. They gazed at God, yet they ate and drank. Who's that going on? Who's that going on? It's going on Nadav and Avihu. That's going on Nadav and Avihu. It comes along Rabbeinu Bachai, and he says, they looked at God's presence, but God didn't wipe them out yet. God waited, right, till later. Now, what does Rabbeinu Bachai here say? Rabbeinu Bachai here says that from here, what do I see? They were fitting to be wiped out at that point already. You're talking about Exodus chapter 24. Where are we holding by? Leviticus chapter 16. So you see, they're already liable. Right? You see, they're already liable, but they weren't taken yet. So what happened? Since they're already liable, but they got saved. Why did they get saved? Why did they get saved? Because they're putting up the Mishkan. They're putting up the tabernacle. Tremendous joy. God's not going to take them yet. They deserve the death penalty. No question about it. God's not going to take them yet. So what does Rabbeinu Bachai say? God does not want to take them because he doesn't want to intertwine the great joy of the Torah, of having the Mishkan go up. So he doesn't want to take them. And that's why it says, because they drew close, right? B'kravasam. They came close in front of God. It doesn't say behakrivam, right? What's the difference in the language? Behakrivam is lashon hifil, causative. Kravasam is active, right? It's active over here, right? If you would have said bahakrivam, then we would have understand the action that they did. Bahakrivam means it's like they brought a sacrifice or they brought something, right? Something like that. Because that's the sin they died from. That was the sin that they brought a strange fire, right? That's what it says in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1. They brought the strange fire, and that's what they died. That's what they died. Now, it says that they brought this fire without ketoris, right? Without this incense. Right, as we're going to explain, they brought the fire pan. They brought this fire, etc. They weren't commanded in. Right? It was a strange fire. So it seems to be there are two things going on over here. You got a fire without incense. Right? The Ramban says in the Book of Leviticus Chapter 10, verse 2. Right? They brought this fire without incense. Well, it doesn't say they brought incense over here. So they're two different things. Two different things over here. But regardless of that, what happened? He says so now let's look back at the verse. Right? Again, we're trying to get into God's mind over here. God's thoughts. Right? So we could explain, we'll cut to the chase. We could explain God, it says over there that they really deserve to die. But God did not put his hand on them. He didn't touch them. Right? He didn't touch them. So the Rebbeinu B'chai says that they were fitting for God to touch them. They were fitting to be wiped out, but they weren't. Why not? Because again, there's great joy over here. Tremendous joy. So God's not going to take this tremendous joy and have them die. Right in the middle. Not going to do that. But it was in his mind. That's no point here. Where that we're going to get to. It was in his mind to wipe them out, but he didn't. Now the Torah says, Book of Leviticus Chapter 16, verse 1, after the death of the sons of Aaron, and they died, because there was already a decree of death on both sons of Aaron. For what reason? For what they did. They brought the strange fire. That's Leviticus chapter 10. They brought the strange fire. Comes along God himself, and he says to Moshe, and he speaks to him. Right? It says, by the Ber Hashem el Moshe, by Yomer Hashem el Moshe. Right? And it says God spoke to Moshe in verse 2. It says God also said to Moshe. So you got a speech, which is, by Dabir means a difficult, harsh tone. And Vayomer is softer tone. Right? So it says, authority decree of death on the sons of Aaron, based on what God already thought. He just didn't take them yet. Because they brought this thing in front of God on Mount Sinai. They went after their eyes. They wanted to see God's presence. They go into the Holy of Holies and all that, and they died. When did they die? They died for the sin on the 1st of Nisan. That was bringing the strange fire. So then God comes to Moshe, and God says to Moshe, say to Aaron, right? Say to Aaron, like we said over here. If I find it, yeah. Say to Aaron and warn him to not come anytime you want into the Holy of Holies. That's verse 2. Right? So again, when was the decree made? The decree against of the two sons of Aaron were already made well before. In the book of Exodus chapter 24, verse 11. That decree was already made. But God didn't take them. Why not? God didn't take them because there was great joy. The Mishkan's going up. Mishkan's going to be put together, put up. So God doesn't take them because doesn't want to mix in this great joy with this terrible tragedy. Right? Now, why does he say all this? Because what did Rebbeinu B'chai here say? Rebbeinu B'chai said there are two sins going on over here by the sons of Aaron. What's the first sin? The first sin was that they already decreed to die b'machshava. In God's thoughts. What does it mean, God's thoughts over here? God's thoughts over here mean that they should have died a long time ago. They should have died in Exodus chapter 24, verse 11. But what does it say over there? It says God did not place his hand on them. So what are the Rebbeinu B'chai here saying? He said they were fitting to die. God should have taken them out. So why doesn't God do that? Because the temple is going to go up. The Mishkan, tabernacle is going to go up. If the tabernacle is going to go up, it's going to be great joy. You're not going to kill them then. So God waited. So then what does God do? What does God do? He warns Aaron. Right? He warns Aaron through Moshe. Right? Because God says to Moshe, verse 2, he tells Aaron, don't go in the Holy of Holies whenever you want. Because if you go in the Holy of Holies whenever you want, you're going to die. You're going to die like your sons died. Even if they did it for the sake of heaven. Even if they did it for all the right reasons. They, whatever it was. They deserve to die over here. So Aaron gets warned. Aaron gets a direct warning. God spoke to Moshe, tell Aaron in verse 2, which we'll see if we get to verse 2. All right, we'll see if we get to the next verse. Or next number of verses. So then it says if they go in, but they don't bring ketores, right? They don't bring incense, they're going to die, right? You'll die just like your two sons. Now remember, there are two things going on over here. One, there are two separate issues. One issue is they brought a strange fire. Right, that's Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1. Second thing is they brought ketores. They brought incense when they weren't allowed. They did it for the sake of heaven. They have this idea. They have this idea that they're gonna, they have an epiphany. They have epiphany. The Mishkan is just about to go up. The tabernacle is supposed to, just about to go up. They want to be so close to God, they jump in. Well, God didn't tell them to jump in. They made the strange fire, but they did it for the sake of heaven. So we mentioned before, doesn't matter. If God tells you to do something, you do it. If he tells you not to do it, you don't do it. And the repercussions could be unbelievable. Not something you want to mess with. They had an epiphany. They thought it was such an auspicious time. God's not going to do anything against them. Not going to punish them. They had such an epiphany. God says, sorry, I didn't tell you to do this. I wasn't interested you did this. They paid with their lives. Again, very hard to understand. Just like we mentioned before, by the sin of Adam and Eve. Adam had a great idea. If I take evil inside of me, and every time I go against my evil inclination, exponentially, my soul gets raised up, my body gets raised up in spiritual terms. But if I do the wrong thing, I debase the body and the soul. God says, I agree with that. That's tremendous. There's only one problem. What's the problem? You're reinventing the wheel. I didn't tell you to do that. I told you not to eat from the tree of knowledge. That's what I told you. Now, even if I would agree with you, what does God tell him? That the Gemara tells us? Calls him a heretic. Adam's a heretic, the greatest of God's creation. Calls him a heretic. Why? Because he didn't listen. He thought he knew better. So God had to go to plan B now. What's plan B? Death. Not a Jewish concept. But God goes to plan B. So here, they have this epiphany, and now Aaron gets warned. God tells Moshe to warn Aaron, do not do this whenever you want. Right? Don't go in the Holy of Holies whenever you want. Don't bring this ketores. Right? Do not bring this incense. They're two separate issues. You got the strange fire, you got the incense. Right? So you shouldn't do this, so you shouldn't die. And now we're going to see in the next number of verses. Now, the sin is explicit. The sin seems to be pretty explicit. And the parsha comes along, and these verses come along and explain and give testimony on this sin. That what? They entered the Holy of Holies without ketores, without incense. So therefore, comes along, God says to Moshe, warn Aaron, so he doesn't die also, that he shouldn't do this. So he says, I'm going to make this stronger. Right? I'm going to make this stronger. That the decree of death was because they came too close to Mount Sinai. How do I know? How am I going to make it stronger? because he brings down a medrash. Says the Rabbeinu B'chai brings down a medrash. What does the medrash say? Medrash says that Nadav and Avihu died in front of God because they brought this strange fire. They brought this strange fire. If you look at Book of Numbers Chapter 2, verse 3, they brought this fire, this strange fire, in the mountain of Sinai, right in the desert of Sinai. What's the problem? They weren't in the desert of Sinai, right? They didn't die in the desert of Sinai, right? That's what Rabbeinu B'chai asked, or the Medrash asked. What? They died there? They didn't die there. They certainly didn't die there. So why does it say before God in the desert of Sinai that really it was in front of God, right? From Har Sinai, from the mountain of Sinai, there was a divine decree, right? There was a decree that they were going to die. Did they die straight then? No. They didn't die. They died later. Oh, why did they die later? We explained. They died later because it's great joy putting up the Mishkan, putting up the tabernacle. God's not going to take them now. He's going to take them later. He's not going to intervene in this great joy and have them die then. Oh, so what does it mean? Right? Rabbeinu B'chai says, so what's the sin b'machshava? What's the sin in his thoughts? The sin in God's thoughts were there was a divine decree. They were going to die before. Right? The Torah says, Book of Exodus, chapter 24, verse 11. Book of Exodus over there says, God did not place his hand on them. Oh, but he wanted to. Right? He wanted to. That was in his mind. That's what he was going to do. But he didn't do it. He didn't do it. He waited. Why not? Because he didn't want to have this great joy marked by the death of the two sons of Aaron. So that's what it means. So there are two things. There's something in God's mind, whatever that means, in God's thoughts. He didn't take them, but he wanted to take them, but he didn't. And there was the actual sin itself. That was the actual, and the sin itself. So the divine, so what do we see? One major thing we see is that the Torah is not in chronological order, right? Torah not in chronological order at all. We see that there was a divine decree. The divine decree goes out, but they don't die till later. They totally don't die till later. We're going to see, right? Not next week, in 2 weeks. We're going to read about the sin of the golden calf. When did the sin of the golden calf happen? Shortly after the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. It just wasn't written down in chronological order, right? So what do we hold? We hold it doesn't matter if it's out of order. Question is why the Torah put it over there, okay? That's the whole question why Moshe put it over there. But in general, it's not a contradiction, right? The Torah doesn't tell me things that happen necessarily in chronological order. Book of Genesis is full of examples, right? Book of Genesis mentions certain things that didn't happen till later. Places that didn't exist till later. Right? Then why does it mention it there? It's okay. Different explanations why. But that doesn't mean anything. There's no contradiction. It's not, taking something, say, oh, look, just because it's written down here, it didn't happen till later. Oh, I got a big question. No question. It just doesn't say, it could have been speaking about the future. Right? We see that by the prophets a lot. They speak about future times. Right? Even though they're writing it down, when they write it down, they're not talking about today. They're talking about the future. You see that many, many times. Right? The commentaries tell us. So that's not a contradiction, just because it's out of order. Right? That's not a contradiction over here. But we see that God can make a decree. God can make a decree and can only do it later. Right? He can take it out later. Or he can make the decree and nullify it. Right? I'll give you an example. There was a decree that made in the book of Esther. Right? The rabbis tell us God made a decree. Jewish people, they were going to get wiped out. Now the question was, what was that decree made in? The decree, was it made in parchment, on stone, or was the decree written in blood? So Elijah the prophet, goes to Moshe Goes to Torah. Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov says what's going on. This is a decree. They said, well, is it decree made in blood or on parchment? So Elijah the prophet runs and he goes and he sees it's made in parchment. So he comes back to the Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov and he says made in parchment. So he said, good. That means that the decree can possibly be annulled. The decree can be nullified. If it's written in blood, then that's a different story. Once the decree is written in blood, can't be nullified. Can never be nullified. We see another case where one of the rabbis goes up to heaven, goes in front of the heavenly courts, and says, I want to say a certain ineffable name of God. I want to stop the destruction of the temple. God says, too late. Not going to happen. It's already a decree in front of me. You're not going to do it. We're not going to allow you to do it. And they throw him back down to this world. Temple gets destroyed. So what does that mean? If a decree is made, and it's made in blood, and nothing can stop it, nothing can stop it. If there's a decree that's not made in blood, that potentially could be overthrown or overturned through what? Through repentance, right? Through tshuva, through mitzvahs, whatever, then it can be overthrown. It can be overturned. So here, this decree was already made. It was already made. It was made already in Exodus chapter 24. But they don't die till later for different reasons. Right? For the reason we mentioned. We're not going to intertwine great joy for Torah, right? And building of the Mishkan. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that because God doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take them now. He's going to take them later. But that decree doesn't go back. Right? That's exactly the point. The decree over there is already done. It's already gone. There's no way to bring it back. No possible way to bring it back. Right? So it's interesting. It's interesting over here that the decree is made. And because the decree is made, there's nothing to do. Right? Nothing to do. But there's another problem. There's another problem over here. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, I got a medrash. I got a medrash that says like this. It says after the death of the two sons of Aaron. How many sons of Aaron were there? 4. Right? Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Itamar. 4 sons. So it says that Aaron's got 4 sons. And really, they're all fitting to die. They all should have died. Why should they have died? So we saw this already in the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Why should they have died? Because of the sin of the golden calf. Because of Aaron's participation at some level, whatever that means. Whatever he did, the sin of the golden calf. So what happened? Moshe Rabbeinu prays for them. Right? And his prayer only worked for half. 2 of his sons died. 2 of his sons died. Because if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 19, right, it says that God got angry at Aaron and he wanted to wipe him out. Right? He wanted to destroy him. Now the language over there is lahashmidoi. The word shmad is to wipe out. Right? It's really to destroy. When we talk about shmad today, the word shmad means that a person, that a person is totally brainwashed, even as a Jew, doesn't know anything about Judaism, but forced not to know anything about Judaism. Or they're forced, if they keep mitzvahs, they're going to die. Right? In time of the Romans, in other times, we call that gezerah shmad. There was a decree of shmad. They wanted to wipe out the Jews. So anytime a Jew practiced anything, they got caught doing it, they were killed. Right? That's called shmad. But over here, what does shmad really mean? Really, literally mean? It means to wipe out, to destroy. That's what it means. Right? So it says over there, in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 19, that God got very upset at Aaron. He's going to wipe him out. Now, what's the word shmad mean? To wipe out. But it means something more specific. He says over there in the Medrash, it means destroying his kids. Destroying a person's kids. That they should die. Right? He brings a verse in Amos chapter 2, verse 9, where it says that I'm going to destroy your seeds from above and your roots from below. Right? So the Medrash learns out from there, from the prophet Amos, that what is destruction? What does the word shpat over here mean? Destruction of your fruit. What's your fruit? Your kids. And they're going to get destroyed. So Moshe Rabbeinu prays, and his prayer only worked for half. Two of his sons died. Right? Not everybody died, but two of his sons died. So then he goes in the whole thing, which we're going to get into a whole bunch of exegesis from this Medrash, different things, what it means that the sons are going to die, whatever, all these different things, which I don't really want to get into because it's pretty lengthy over here. There was one other thing I didn't want to see here. Yeah, actually, it's all part of the Medrash. Whatever, it's all part of the Medrash. I'm not gonna go into. So, I guess before I go further, I'll stop there for a second. Any questions on that? Someone asked, "Did the decree possibly come as a result of Aaron's involvement in the worship of the golden calf?" Yes. 100%. Right? The Medrash brings that down. Or Chaim HaKadosh seems to say the same thing. That at some level, whatever that sin was, very hard to understand. Aaron's sin over here. Whatever level it was, God had mercy on him, but he took two of his sons. So someone asks, well, was that ratified in blood? Yeah. That sin was ratified in blood where the two sons died. Right? Someone was going to die over here, and it was the two sons. Moshe Rabbeinu prayed, two sons died, two didn't. Right? But it wasn't just the other two didn't. It's what did these two do to deserve death? So that we've spent the last number of weeks going through. Right? Going through that and what happened and what possibly could have happened. But make no mistake, he says that that's part of the reason, right? For the sin of the golden calf. Yeah, somebody asks, can I explain trust in Hashem with all your heart? Do not rely on your understanding. Yeah, we'll explain it like this, that the Torah says, we say in the Shema every day, right? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Now, all your heart over here, what does this mean? Right? All your heart means that you are going to do whatever God says. No matter what, even if God forbid you may have to forfeit your life. We will do whatever God says. Now, why can't you trust your seichel? Why can't you trust your understanding? Because a person could say, you know what? We could justify ourselves and say, no, that's not what really God wants. He really wants me to do this. or he wants me to do something else, or, I'm going to do things the way I see fit, the way I think is right according to Torah. I can't even tell you how many times I've had people tell me this. Well, that's your opinion. Okay. And I got 3,000 years of history behind me. You can say what you want about me, but what about what the rabbis say? Oh, I don't care what the rabbis say. My opinion is just as valid. Okay, that's where the discussion ends. Right? Because you're not holding by the same thing. Right? So the point here is that if a person goes according to what they think, doesn't what they think, won't that change? Maybe that'll change over time. Right? I heard many times when I was learning by the conservative movements, and they said things change with time. I don't know. The Torah doesn't tell me that. There's nowhere in the Torah that tells me that. You're going to say, but certain things we don't do today. You're right. There are certain things we don't do today. Well, we can't do it because we don't have a temple in Jerusalem. That's true. But there are certain things we can't do either way. Why not? Because they lost their potency. Because they lost their potency, it's not God's fault. It's not God's fault these things don't exist. Right? Totally not God's fault they don't exist. So what happened? So why are there certain things that went by the wayside? Because we blew it. We, the Jewish people. We blew it. We didn't do what we're supposed to do. So a person might say, well, that must mean that the Torah is not forever. God forbid. Doesn't the Torah tell me many times this is forever? This doesn't change. Can't add or subtract to the Torah. The Torah tells me this many times. Many times. But see, if I only go according to my own understanding, then you know what? We could be no different than Nazis. God forbid. Yamach Shemoy v'zich. May their name be blotted out, may they rot. Right? Why? They also thought they were doing the right thing. No question they thought they were doing the right thing. That's what their minds told them to do. Their hearts didn't matter. They were convinced. They were totally convinced. Right? So the question is, you don't rely on your understanding. You're right. You can never rely on our understanding. That doesn't mean we do things. That doesn't mean we do things because I just believe, right? That's a Christian idea. We do things based on knowledge. Now, were there things we're going to understand better? Yeah. Things that we understand worse? Yeah. And a lot of things we're not going to understand. Many, many things. Probably 80% or more of the Torah. We're not going to understand. So a person will say, if I can't understand it, why keep it? Then they'll come up with all kinds of reasons why they don't have to keep it. So we can't go according to our own understanding. All right, the best thing we can do is do according to what the rabbis told us to do. Again, it doesn't mean I leave my brain out of it. It doesn't mean I don't think. It doesn't mean I'm a robot over here. We have free will. No one's put a gun to our head, right? No one's got a gun to their head to listen to me, that's for sure. I mean, if you do, that's okay. It's your problem, right? But everyone's got free choice. We all have free choice. But we can use our free choice for bad things. We can totally use it for bad things. All right, so based on that, our trust in God is whether we understand what he does or not. Doesn't matter. Right? The problem is, I mentioned this last night, my class in Pirkei Avos, that many people today want to understand why exactly they're going through X, Y, and Z. What's the measure for measure? Why am I suffering over it? Why did I go through this and that? The answer is many times we don't know. We don't know. Could be this is the situation we're put in. It could be something our soul has to go through, from past life experience, whatever. All kinds of different things possible. Possible. But I think it's an absolute chutzpah, no offense, It's an absolute chutzpah to try and figure this out. Why? So I said, it's very simple. If you would make a list, a very short list, because I don't want to destroy people more than they already might be. You make a short list on a daily basis. How did I interact with others? How did I interact with God? If I prayed, if I didn't pray, am I working on character traits? Right? A million things. There are a million things where we probably, if we were to take this example, most people today wouldn't get more than a 50. I think I said a 30, but I'll be generous. Let's say a 50. Why? Because the Hovos Levavos states clear. We are not reaching a quarter of what we're supposed to do. Not a quarter, not a half, not a third. God gives us life. We still have to serve him. We still have obligations. But if someone wants to think, and the example I gave was that if a person says, I prayed today and I prayed with so much intention, God's going to answer all my prayers. That no one should ever, ever say. Ever. Ever, as we would say in Boston. Right? Person should never make such a statement. Why? You really think you prayed well enough? God's going to open up your file and say, let's see. Okay. This person thinks he prayed well enough. Let's see. Let's see where his mind was. Maybe he did pray well enough. Maybe. Right? And we're not even talking about Kabbalah here. If a person realizes we don't do a quarter of what we're supposed to do, you're not even going to ask the question. You'll say, I'm suffering and it's hard and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I changed my life and all this. That's great. Does that mean God's going to get everything you want? No. I'm not saying a person has to suffer more. I'm not saying that. Right? But a person has to realize, why do you deserve anything? Right? The next mission I'm going to get to one day in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of Our Fathers, Chapter 2, Mishnah 9, and that is, the person going to say, serve God. Very well, you should get all this reward. Why should you get rewards? That's what you're created to do. It's what you're supposed to do. So if that's what you're supposed to do, you deserve a hoodsie, right? So we mentioned what a hoodsie is, right? Company called Hood made these Dixie cup ice creams, half chocolate, half vanilla. What they call it, a hoodsie, because that was the company. Anyway, God says I'm going to give you a hoodsie. Oh, your Bostonians should enjoy that one. You got to give me a hoodsie over here for what? Because you did what I commanded you to do. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all people. 48th level he had of intelligence. Right? The 49 levels. He had 48. And he wanted to see God's attributes. He wanted to understand. He wanted to understand why God does what he does. What did God say? You can only see me from behind. No one can see me face to face and live. So I'm going to say with the utmost clarity, anyone who's asking that question, think again. And think a third time and think a fourth time. You're not privy to that information. And if God maybe will give it to you one day, you'll see in hindsight, maybe, which almost never happens. But maybe God will throw you a proverbial bone. Do you deserve it? No, none of us do. None of us do. Right? It's the decree in front of him. That's what God does. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it seems bad. We don't know. It can always be worse. God forbid. That question should never be asked. Never. We can say, okay, how do I deal with this? How do I continue to be a servant of God when I'm being tossed around? Can ask the question. But why? I could, if I was playing God, put on my George Burns glasses and my funny mustache, I would have a field day with everybody, myself included. Nobody would pass this. Nobody. Because there's such depth over here. There's such depth of what we're obligated to do. You want to tell me you hit 100% every single time on everything? Oh, you worked on anger today. Did you do anything to get angry? Actually not. Did you think about cursing? Oh, well, there are multiple levels. It's not pushing off the fact that people don't suffer. That we're not saying. We made that clear many times. But to understand why, and even if it doesn't depend on you, right? Let's say it has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong. And a person goes through something, whatever it is, whatever the difficulty is. Could be many things. Okay. So what if it has to do with your soul? Right? We're all reincarnated souls. Come back to this world twice, 3 times, 4 times maximum. Because our soul didn't do what it was supposed to do previously, so God gives another chance. But this is probably our last chance to reach whatever potential we can. You think we're going to have what to say? That I did this right and that right, that you have no idea who your soul is. I once told one of my rabbis very much steeped in Kabbalah, I said, if I ever saw my Gilgul, I'd tell him off, I'd say this, I'd say that, I'd punch him in the nose. He goes, if you saw him in the mirror, you wouldn't even recognize him. I'm like, but that's not the point. He said, that is the point. We don't know. There could be certain things we go through only because of that. Not because of our own personal sins, which I highly doubt. But let's say, even if a person didn't deserve it for other reasons, why did God put him through this? Because your soul had to go through it. That make you feel better? It's not going to make you feel better. Because you're going to say, but why? Why? We don't know. We don't know. And I think, again, I understand people are in pain. I understand people suffer, right? But you have to understand in the bigger scheme of things. In the bigger scheme of things, there's no greater chutzpah than that. You, me, everybody included in the whole world, put everyone together from the beginning of time till now. We're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. Think about a galaxy. Think about multiple galaxies. We're living on one planet, right? On a continent. I'll go backwards this time. On a continent, in a state, in a city, in a town. We're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. You deserve an answer from the one who gives you life, from the one who created the world, from the one who doesn't put the earth too close to the sun so we don't get incinerated, for the one that doesn't take it a little further back. That would be like Pluto. Even though Pluto got demoted as a planet, would be a frozen tundra. We wouldn't be here. In either case, we wouldn't be here. I understand. Curiosity killed the cat. I get it. We want to know why. We want to know this. We want to know that. Our puny heads, forget it. You're not going to figure it out. God ain't coming to you most likely. You got to deal with it. You got to deal with this. It's the hand you've been dealt with. Some people have it better. Some people have it worse. We get tossed around. There are a lot of things we're not in control of. None. We're not in control. Person has to realize that we're not in control. He's the one that's in control. Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, we're born against our will, we die against our will. And in parentheses, Kaufman would say, you still have to live. Okay. So he gives us life. There's so much to be thankful for. You can say, yeah, but this happened. Okay. And that other thing happened. And I went through this trauma. We're not denying it's hard. Everyone has been given, they've been given whatever they've been given. There are people, their whole life, they're sick. From they're a kid, they have to deal with things. Is that fair on the kids? Is that fair on the parents? No matter whether it's fair. It's what that soul has to go through. And then other people around them have to deal with it. We can't make heads or tails of anything in general, why things happen. So now someone comes along and says, but it's not right. Well, who are you to say it's not right? Society may say, yeah, it's a terrible thing. I may agree. According to Torah, maybe it's a tremendous transgression. What could be done or what a person did or whatever had done to them. 100%. That does not negate the fact that we still have an obligation to serve the one who created us. It might be much more difficult. Person may be angry, have tremendous anger. Okay? We have a lot to work on. But we have to realize we're not in control. We're not in control of anything. Right? Here I am drinking my tea. Can I pinpoint when I'm going to have to go to the bathroom? No. To the split second, not even close. Not even close. We have to realize, I'll mention this once, twice, 50 times, 100 times. We have to realize there's suffering that exists in the world. God put evil in the world. He allowed people to tap in. The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, he allows people to tap in and he stops it at some point. Are people going to be affected in a negative way? Very well could be. They chose evil. And you know what? Person's just a messenger. We also forget that. You know, someone damaged my car. They did this. They did that. Caused other damage. So what do person hits a dog with the stick. Not that I recommend it. Hit a dog with a stick. Who's the dog go after? The stick. We have to remember where it comes from. If we're going to say something so egregious, you have to remember you're not in control. I'm not saying you don't have to deal with it. I'm not saying you might have to go therapy. There are a lot of things we may have to do to overcome certain things. And people may be given the raw end of the stick. May very well be. Forget physical abuse. Maybe just mental abuse. What about apathy? Get someone who goes through a terrible situation. Everyone looks at you like, wow, you must be in difficult straits. That must be hard. Well, but we're not going to help you. We're not even going to empathize with you. We're going to play Monday morning quarterback. And we're going to say, you know what? You should have done this. You should have done that. You should have done the other thing. Well, I don't care what you say. You're not helping me. You're not even being empathetic. So you know what? I went through an odyssey of 17 years. I'll tell you about myself. I went through an odyssey of 17 years. Did I ever get empathy? Yeah, from friends I got empathy. Family? No. Gonzo. Nobody there. Nobody home. Now, if I understand Torah, and I understand someone who doesn't have Torah, are they going to be empathetic? I don't know. It says the Jewish people, how can you tell who they are? They're Baishanim, they're Rachmanim, they do Gimilus Chasadim. They get embarrassed easily, Baishanim, Rachmanim, they have compassion on others, and they do a lot of chesed, a lot of acts of loving kindness. Yeah? So what happened to me? What happened to me? What about me? Rachmanim, to a certain extent. Not going to say there weren't people that, had compassion. Everyone else, I didn't hear anything. Nothing. Maybe for one person. But you know what? If I wouldn't be so steeped in Torah, I understand where it happens. I understand how it happens. Right? It makes perfect sense. Guys, if you don't have Torah, if you're in the parable is, you're in a sailboat in the ocean, no rudder. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to go around in circles, right? You're going to go around in circles if you don't have Torah also. Morality changes. It's relative. Feel like it, don't feel like it's permissible. It's not, right? What was forbidden 40 years ago today becomes a mitzvah. It's crazy. It's a crazy world. I can scream till today, tomorrow, things I've seen, things I've heard, kicked upside the head. I'm still here. I don't say I'm perfect by any stretch. Was I affected in a negative way many times? Yeah. Many, many times. Am I perfect? Not even close. Not even close. But you know what? The more I learn, and the more I learned, I had good people behind me. Okay, you got to move on with life. You got to move on with life. You can't stay in the past. My Rebbe says if you stay in the past, you have no future. So you got to put your best foot forward. You got to work hard. Could I have just said, you know what? I changed my life. This is what happens. I'm out. I could have said that. I know someone who did that. They said they were put in a situation that was way too hard for them. And we believe God doesn't put a person in a situation they can't handle. And they said, I couldn't handle it. And they went back and became non-religious. They became religious as a non-religious Jew, went back and left. They cracked. They couldn't act whatever the situation was. So I could have said about myself, same thing, easily. What do I need this for? Right? God forbid. What? This is the thanks you get for helping people. Torah, mitzvah, self-sacrifice, stood up against the world. This is the end result. No, I never said that. because we don't understand. We don't understand, but you know what? Everything I went through made me who I am today. And I can speak so passionately about it because I went through it. Still going through it in different ways. Right? So how do you do that when the whole world's against you and just kicks you in the face? It was kind of like, one time I was in New York, I was running for the train, put my token in, I was running 100 miles an hour, token got jammed. And I went flying. Some guy looks over me, he's like, wow, that was like it must have hurt. Kept walking. I was like, I got to get out of here. Not a place to live. That's what I felt over the years. You're by yourself. You, as people have said, you are Abraham. You're fighting against the whole world. The whole world may just be your family. Maybe it's be friends, right? Whatever it is. But you're fighting against the norm. So what do you do when you fight against the norm? You can give up. Very easy to give up. Be like everybody else. Be brain dead like everyone else. Could do that. Is that going to make you happy in the long run? It's going to eat at you. Because you know what the truth is. Right? But facing reality is hard. It's very hard. So I came to the conclusion, my early 20s, even before anything happened, either I have to see what real Torah is, or the whole rest, or see a psychiatrist, or the whole rest of the world is cracked. Now that's a pretty chutzpahdik thing to say, pretty conceited thing to say. But you know what? When I came to Torah and mitzvahs, it made perfect sense. And it's 100% true. We'll go on record. We are recording. The whole world is cracked. It's cracked. It's totally messed up. So now, when a person turns the other way, they go in the right path. Why in the world should we ever think that if I go in the right path, it's going to answer everything? Person's going to get married. They're going to have great kids. Everyone's going to go in the right direction. No one's ever going to be sick. We're going to live happily ever after. Happily ever after. I don't know anybody's happened to. Everybody struggles in different ways. Some more, some less. The person can say, come on, I got 10 things going on at the same time. Right? Right now in my own personal life, I'm torn in 20 different directions, all at once. At once. It's not just one thing. It's one thing, it's another thing, it's 3 things, 5 things. I'm not saying anything about myself. Right? But at the same time, would anyone know the difference if I didn't speak about it? No. I go learn, I get my class, I do this, I do that. Doesn't mean anything else is not going on. Know what it means? Everything going smooth doesn't mean that. There are good things going on, tremendously good things going on. Other things that, other things that are hard, on a daily basis. So I can tell you, okay, if it's a couple things, you deal with this, you deal with that, you move on. If it's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 things all at once, you go, bam, it's overload. It's overload. So what do? How do you deal with that? Right? I'll play psychologist now. How do you deal with that? You get steeped in the Torah. You don't let it get to you. You got to deal with it. You got to put your best foot forward. But guess what? You got to learn Torah. That's how you push it away. First, going to say that's it. You don't need therapy. Maybe you need therapy also. That'll also help. Go see nature, relax, do yoga, workouts, take out your adrenaline that way. Many different ways. Many different possible ways. See if it's only one thing. Okay, you deal with this one thing, you move on. But it doesn't always work that way. Certainly not my life. It's never just one thing. It's always things compounded. This, that, something else. We're not in control. Right? But at the end of the day, you try and not let it destroy you. Right? Not an easy thing. Not going to say it's an easy thing. You try and not let it destroy you. Right? But a little bit of Torah pushes away a lot of darkness. So now I can deal with other things that don't get to me as much. You know why? Someone's going to say something. They're insane. They are insane. They should be tied up. Right? Go to Sing Sing. They're insane. Now, even though I say that 100 times, and even if a person would say something, it's gonna tick me off, so to speak. It might, but it's gonna be much less. Much, much less. And any psychologist tell you these people shouldn't even be in your head, you're right. 100% they shouldn't be. So over the years, certain things have gotten much easier. Much, much easier. Right? And that was the greatest advice I was given. Is that these people, you look at them like they're mentally challenged. Someone who's mentally challenged, they say something, they bump into you. They slobber all over you. They don't know what they're doing. So what are you getting upset about? It's inconvenient. It's not nice. Whatever. They have the mental capacity of a 3-year-old. Right? And they're like 25. They're 15, whatever. Right? Why in the world? First of all, you're not going to say anything. Second of all, you're not going to do anything. Third of all, you just move on because that person, they're not capable. They're not capable. So someone will say, come on, parents, siblings, this, that. They're also not capable. They may not be capable. They may be whack jobs. They may be, I don't know, they may be narcissist. They may be conceited. They may be both. I don't know if there's that much of a difference between them. Whatever. There could be things that these people say that they do. They don't care about you. Oh, sorry, sorry, there's a fire. I got to go. Oh, you said there's a fire? No, I'll get to it. Don't worry. It's fine. There's nobody home. So they say something. Aren't they mentally retarded? Well, I know you can't say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. Right? Aren't they mentally retarded? Yeah, they are. 100%. Maybe these people never should have kids. Maybe because they're not capable. They don't know how to show emotion. Right? They know how to give emotion. They know how to give compliments. Right? The list goes on. So you're going to say, wow, a person like that might grow up in a totally messed up family. You're right. 100%. That means you have to relearn everything. And if a person's a parent, you have to relearn not to make the same mistakes they did. Is that an easy thing? No. It's a very humbling experience in different ways. Because you grew up seeing everything that's wrong. Now, some people may have it better. Some people may have it worse. Question is how we deal with it. That's the question. So a person can say, well, it's not fair. Not a question of being fair. That's not the question. Did people ask for their own situations? No. It happened to them. They didn't ask for it. 100% they didn't ask for it. The question is how we deal with it. But if a person's steeped in Torah and you have proper Jewish philosophy, you know how to deal with it. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean a person may not necessarily need some therapy to get through it. Okay? But once you have your mind strapped on, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world. So I said, things that would like paralyze me years ago. People said things and this and that. Today, it's like one in one ear, not the other. Not even that. Maybe I'll give a fetch about it, maybe whatever, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. Right? You know why it doesn't mean anything anymore? Because these people are insane. That's what it means. They're insane. And anyone who's insane, I'm never, ever going to take them serious at all about anything. I don't care if they're a parent, they're a sibling, they're whoever. I'm not going to take what they say seriously. Let them insult me. Let someone say, I got a relative say one. Let someone say, hey, if I breathe on your food, does it mean it's not kosher? What an obnoxious thing to say. I said, you know what? No, it's kosher. It says bad breath on it. That's a good answer. Isn't that offensive? Yeah, it's offensive. I need to speak to a person like that? No. I need to waste my time with such a thing? No. Turn the person into a pretzel tomorrow. Right? Within 30 seconds. Turn them into a pretzel. Is it worth it? No. So what are you going to get upset about? You're right. It's annoying. I agree. I agree. We don't have a choice with our families. We don't. Fortunate or unfortunate, we don't. So the question is how we deal with it. But you're going to say, mental abuse. You're right. Mental abuse has to be dealt with. But I'm saying, a lot of what I had to go through in different ways, right, was based on the fact that I understand how things work. And I understand someone who grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho, no offense. I know as a potato farmer grew up in Idaho, they don't know anything from anything. They don't know about morality. They don't know about Torah. They don't know about zero. Because they never learned. They've never been taught. They've never been nothing. So if that's the case of doing things based on desire, and they're saying whatever they want, so why am I going to take that seriously? Why in the world would I take that seriously? You're going to say because what they say affects me. Right? Okay, it does. It's family. So what? So what? It's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. Sticks and stones. I can sling it just as good as someone else can. Probably even a little bit sharper, right? Okay, what do I need that for? I don't need it, right? The question is how we view it and how we deal with it. And it can be painful, right? Life has nothing to do with being fair or not being fair. Life has nothing to do with that. Zero. We're given certain situations. The Ramchal and others say we're born in order to toil, to struggle. We're living in the richest generation in the history of man right now. Go back a couple hundred years, see how they lived. We're living in the lap of luxury. Doesn't matter, you have more, you have less. We're living in the lap of luxury. We're not suffering like they were. Okay, there are other issues we go through. This is fine. I'm not saying each generation has their own things they have to work on. 100%. That I would agree. But the question is, through Torah and mitzvahs, I can view it in a certain way. Right? Is that going to overcome everything? Not necessarily. A person may need, to speak to someone, to go through therapy, whatever. I'm not saying therapy is necessarily always going to work either. It depends. Depends on what the situation is. I'm just speaking in generalities. Right? But psychological abuse is it's not something to sneeze at. Something that has to be dealt with. Person could, the worst thing anyone can ever do, it's like, person has kids, you don't compare them. You say, oh, how come you don't like your sister? How come you don't like your brother? Or how come this? Or how come that? Or God forbid, you don't give compliments. I can also destroy kids. How come they never say anything good about me? They tell me, do this, do that, do the other thing. And that affects kids. It can affect adults also. Right? There are a lot of different things going on that we are not privy to. Some of it, I would agree, we do to ourselves. That I would agree. 100% I would agree. Right? But there's a heck of a lot more we're totally not in control of. The only question is, how do we deal with it? That's the question. So somebody asks, so I'll take questions here. Somebody asks, so we're saying we go through hell because we deserve it? Not necessarily. We could be going through a difficulty in childhood that has nothing to do with us. It could have to do with what your soul has to go through. What your reincarnated soul, your soul may have to go through this for whatever reason. Maybe, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever it is, maybe in a previous life, that soul was totally conceited, pushed other people around, whatever the case is now, the soul comes back now and you're getting paid back for all the things you did to others. But here you're not in a position to do anything. Let's say it's a child, and you get bullied, psychological abuse from parents. Is that in your control? It's not in your control. You didn't do anything wrong. A lot of times kids think, oh, parent yells at them this and that. It's because they did something wrong. If that's not necessarily the case. They may just have other issues and they just yell at you, take it out on you. It might not be your fault, so why do you have to go through it? So what's the obvious answer? It may have nothing to do with you. It has to do with your soul. That your soul may have to go through it because of certain things you did previously. Someone asks, learning Torah getting more spiritual, do we kind of ward off some of that bad stuff? You could, right? Learning Torah pushes away a lot of evil. At the same time, that doesn't mean we don't have an evil inclination, right? We have to, someone asked last night, my class in Pirkei Avos, they said, what, you tell me non-Jews don't have evil inclination? No, I said when they convert, that's when the evil inclination gets even stronger. Doesn't mean they don't have an evil inclination. Everyone has an evil inclination, right? We all have an evil inclination. Does that mean all the bad stuff goes away? No. Doesn't mean that. What it means is that a person can go through certain things. They can overcome them. They can work on their character traits. And then a whole nother slew of things come up. It's not like we only have one thing to work on. We could have, countless number of character traits to work on. Okay. So you work on one, you're working hard, then something else happens with something else. right? Different character trait, let's say. Or you're given different trials that you didn't have before, right? So on Yom Kippur, the whole day of Yom Kippur, when we beat our chest saying, I did this, I did that, I sinned this way, that way, the other way. Next year, we should be beating our chest for things not the same as we did the year before. Because if we had other sins that we did, God forbid, it means at least we're growing because we're not doing the same things over and over again. That shows spiritual growth. Does that mean we're perfect? No. Doesn't mean we're perfect in any way, shape, or form. Right? It means we're going to be given other things to still work on as well. And even things we worked on, we're going to have tests on that. Doesn't mean everything disappears. Right? Let's all make that mistake. It doesn't mean everything disappears. Some things you might have an easier time with. Other things you may have a more difficult time with. And other things you didn't even think of all of a sudden now come up. Different things that we didn't even think of. We didn't fathom at all. So what happens? We see it doesn't disappear. Right? We see things can happen where we're not in control. Totally not in control. What are we in control of? We are in control of how we deal with it. That's what we can control. Now you're going to say, come on, if so many things happen, how, if it's overload, how can you control it? Okay. So you got to take things step by step, right? You got to take, you can't deal with everything in one shot. It's like, it's like trying to deal with a bunch of chains. Let's say you have a bunch of chains. They're all intertwined. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to pick them all out together. You can't do that. You take one knot, take another knot, take a third knot, right? Undo this one. Oh, I got one chain that came up. Then I have to, then I got these other chains I have to deal with. It's not, you can't deal with everything in one shot. It's over with. It's like someone, wants to convert. You can't tell them to do everything in one shot. They can't. It's impossible. It's overload. Right? We have to take certain things in sound bites. Right? Just because the person didn't react or whatever doesn't mean you don't have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. Question is when and how and under what circumstances. One thing though, I will say is that if we really lived our lives the way we should, meaning if we had absolute faith in God, we understand God sending things our way, God sending us these messengers and all that, and everything comes through him, we'd have a much greater equilibrium. We wouldn't be worried about anything. Okay. You have to deal with it. May not be so easy. Different things. But guess what? You have the mechanics how to do it. If you have the mechanics how to do it, then that's something else entirely. But that's what tests are for. To help us grow, not to break us. Now, we may say this test is very hard. Not only is it so hard, but person may feel they're at the breaking point. But we have to understand, if we really understand, what's behind it, God wants us to be better, even if he's squeezing us. And he wants us to trust in him and that he runs the world. What am I worried about? I can tell you a number of times in my own life. Certain things, you're worried about this, you're worried about that. And then something happens, God says, God gives you a wink, so to speak, and it's like, don't worry about it because, I'm going to take care of it. He takes care of it. Right? And then all of a sudden you realize you're worried for all these things for nothing. Now, does that mean you don't put your best foot forward? No. You got to put your best foot forward. Right? That there's no question. At the same time, does putting my best foot forward guarantee success? No. You would think it would. It doesn't. Something else could happen. Or God could just say, no. You pray harder, you work harder, you change this, you change that. And what happens? Anything change? No. Doesn't seem like anything changed. At some point, things will change at some level. They don't stay that way forever. Person's not just in a downward spiral forever. It could be, if there's negative behavior and a person just acts on that negative behavior, the only place they're going to go is down. So if a person's down, that's great. Then you can only go up. Right? But if a person's doing destructive things to themselves then you're putting yourself at a tremendous disadvantage. Tremendous disadvantage of something that you may never overcome, potentially. Why? Because everything you do is negative or potentially negative. It doesn't help you. Just the opposite, right? It's causing this downward spiral over and over and over. We are creatures of habit. So we can continue doing the wrong thing, seemingly, and end up digging our own holes. And then we're in quicksand and we can't get out. Does that mean it's impossible? No, it doesn't mean it's impossible. Definitely doesn't mean impossible. But, if we think negatively, then those negative thoughts go with us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I believe in God and that God runs the world and he knows what's best for me, even if I don't think what I'm going through is the best for me. That doesn't matter, because there are many things we see, many things we see we don't understand at all. We have no idea at all. So I stopped trying to figure out things years ago. You take it day by day. We know what we have to work on. If not, you can think about it, write a list, things that we want to work on to be better in character traits, other things. Okay. Right. Now, does that mean even if I want to do that, it's going to be easy? Take exercise. Exercise takes discipline. Right? If you're not disciplined, you're not going to do it. You might have no choice because doctor says, listen, you got high blood pressure, you got this, you got that. You have to, you have to do something like 20 minutes a few times a week. Get the endorphins going and all that. But you have to be disciplined to do it. Going on a diet, no different. Right? You want to lose weight? How are you going to lose weight? You have to have discipline. If you don't have discipline, it's never going to work. But guess what? There are setbacks. See, that's the problem. We work hard, we strive, and then we get hit with something. Or then we get knocked down with something else. You got to pick yourself up. And again, it's kind of like, a person playing baseball. Person plays baseball. You get hit, you get hit with the ball. You're at bat, you get hit with the ball. What's the first thing they tell you? You have to get right back up in the batter's box. Because if not, you'll be afraid, right? I just saw a post someone put up about, I don't know, the kids being different athletes or different things, whatever it was. And the father, I think it was the father who said, yeah, tried out baseball, a few other things. And he said by baseball, he got hit in the face with the ball, and that was it. And just like it killed him. I mean, in certain ways, could kill you, if it's coming 90 miles an hour, whatever. But when a person's afraid to get back in the batter's box because they're afraid, because they keep playing this thing over and over in their head, they're going to get, they're going to get hit. They don't want to get hit if it's coming 60, 70 miles an hour, or more. You're going to be terrified, right? They're going to be terrified. So, if a person tries to do the right thing to get knocked down, they say, okay, why bother? I just got knocked down. They're probably going to get knocked down again, and probably a third time, right? So what are you going to do? Give up? People will give up. So people say, well, I can't do it, and that's it. It's too hard, whatever. Well, what's God telling you? Okay, you got knocked down. Probably get knocked down again. Probably, another time. We don't always do the right thing, but we don't have to force feed it and continually do the wrong thing. We have to work hard, right? We definitely have to work hard. It's no question. But is there a guarantee if I do the right thing in this world? Forget about the next world, different issue. Well, get a reward. But in this world, does doing the right thing guarantee X, Y, and Z? No. Doesn't mean that. But look what you did, self-sacrifice, this, that. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. I know people over the years, once they showed a certain level of self-sacrifice, things changed. Almost instantaneously. But they couldn't do it before, for whatever reason. All of a sudden, now they show absolute self-sacrifice. God says, okay, I'm going to open the doors now. You might have had it hard for this amount of time, that amount of time. Now I'm going to open up all kinds of doors. You say, what happened? What changed? Your attitude changed. Your actions changed. But again, how does that work? How does God look at it? How does he change things? That's up to him. And we could do things, tremendous self-sacrifice, and still seem we get a goose egg, right? We get a 0 for our efforts. Not in God's mind. But if we're working hard, even if we don't see necessarily the end result, right? That could be because that end result is not good for us. God knows what he's doing. That's the bottom line. And no matter what happens, he's the one in charge. Right? As my Rebbe said a number of times, during this last time period, right? I.e. during Corona, he said many times a day, you have to say, God, you're the one in charge. You're the one who runs my life. You're the one I believe in. I don't believe in man. I don't have any faith in man. I have to put my best foot forward. Okay. You're the one calling the shots. When a person lives that way and really thinks that way, then life is different. You understand where things come from. God sends messengers, how are you going to react? Right? But you understand how things work. So I would say that's probably 95% of the game today. Understanding how it works and then putting that into practice. Putting that into practice is a heck of a lot more difficult. But I'll tell you the truth. If you're 90% there, 95% there, the other 5% is going to take effort. It's going to take real effort. But most people are not even holding by 90%. Not even holding by 70%. If that. Right? They're only holding by 20%. Most of the world. Right? So if that's the case, we don't care what most of the world does. We care what we do, what our obligation is. But most of the world we mentioned is cracked. And they're totally messed up. And that's the way we have to view it. Because what we see is not reality. Not reality at all. Many, many things go against what God wants. Goes against what Torah, what Torah says. So the idea is we have to do what we need to do, regardless of what goes on around us. And it's very easy, very, very easy to say, well, I've done this, I've done that. I've worked at changing myself. Why am I still going through this? Very easy to say that. But I would say it's a chutzpah to say it because who says you've done a quarter of what you're supposed to do, which we said before. Right? So we have to get that mentality out of our heads. The problem is we get beaten down in life. That's the problem. We get beaten down in life. So that, we feel like we're getting squeezed. Things are very hard in so many different ways. But if God knows what he's doing, and this is to your benefit, right? It's to your benefit to make you who you need to be. Even if we don't think so, right? You have to see the bigger picture. We have to be able to see the bigger picture. And if we don't see the bigger picture, and we only think, God forbid, that God is a masochist, right? We only think that God is a masochist over here. Then you're never going to come out of it. You're just going to be more angry. And then eventually, if a person's a Jew, they'll stop keeping Torah mitzvahs. Because they think God owes them, and we're not getting what we should. Right? I'm not getting what I deserve. Abraham got what he deserved. Look at all the tests he went through. All right. God's like, Abe, what do you think of my covenant? Gotta save the best for last, circumcision. 100 years old. What a covenant. Kind of hard to understand. Right? But God made Abraham into who he was. Abraham had a legacy. Right? He went through all those tests, those trials. That was his legacy. And everybody around him knew who he was. Right? And knew his fame all over. For what he stood for. What he lived for. Does that mean in any way, shape, or form he had it easy? Okay, God made him wealthy. And he had a lot of power. That didn't make it any easier. Got thrown in a fiery furnace. His wife is taken. There's a famine. He has to fight the 5 world powers. Saves only remaining relative loads, goes through a lot of trials. A lot of trials. He could have said, God, why don't you just let me sip pina colada so I can learn Torah? They do other things, but he wouldn't have been who he was. And he put in the world the ability for us to fight against trials and tribulations. Because Abraham, the Torah says, what's he called? Avram HaIvri. People mistakenly translate and say he's Abraham the Jew. He wasn't Jewish. Right? He might have kept the Torah before he was given, whatever that means. But Ivri over here means he was on one side of the world. That's what the word Aver means. He's on one side of the world, everyone else, idolaters, and everyone else on the other side. It was him against the world. So the fact that we can fight any trials and tribulations in our lives, we owe to him. Because of all the self-sacrifice that he went through. And I thought about it that, when I was in my, late teens, early 20s, and I thought, well, I have to see what Torah really is, or the whole world is just cracked. That was the conclusion I came to. Right? It's one way or the other. See, I was even extremist back then. Right? Either way, it's either Torah's true, right? Or the world is just totally messed up. And it could be both. The Torah is true and the world is messed up. Right? But I thought this many years ago. More than 30 years ago, I thought this. And the world's a heck of a lot worse than it was then, in many ways. Totally gone downhill. No question about that. But, Torah opened my eyes. It explained a lot of things. It explained a lot of things about human personality. And it made me understand things. I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it made me understand and swallow certain things that, this now makes sense. This now makes sense. Doesn't mean it was an easy thing to go through, right? But once I saw what it was and I understood what it was, that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. That's 90%, 95% of the game. It's understanding how the world works, what God wants from us, what our purpose is. That's 95% right there. That's what it is. Now, with all that, are we singing and dancing, whistling and Dixie every day that I have the opportunity to learn Torah? Or are we just wallowing in self-pity to say, wow, it's so hard and it's this and it's that? Yeah, I'll learn a little bit, but we got to live inspired. We got to try and live inspired. Right? I'm saying this about myself also. Got to try and live inspired as much as possible because life is hard. Life is definitely hard in so many different ways. But a little bit of Torah pushes away a lot of darkness, right? A lot of darkness. So therefore, we should help others. We should do chesed, acts of loving kindness. We should give charity if we can, right? Help others, that struggle. Things that make us feel good, make other people feel good, right? And try and bring the world back to where it was before Adam and Eve had sinned. That's a huge responsibility for Jew or non-Jew, 100%. Right? The problem is, is that we sort of, we get caught up chasing our tails and we forget what we're supposed to be doing. We forget about the bigger picture. As we said before, person going to say, listen, I've had this hard, that hard, the other. You're right. Life is hard. Life is definitely hard. Everybody has it at some level. But the Torah says, or let's say better, we pray every day. I'm supposed to serve God with great joy. Contradiction. Yeah, being down alive, how can I serve with great joy? Because I have to see the bigger picture. I should be whistling Dixie. Everyone listening now should be doing the moonwalk and whistling Dixie to thank God that they're holding by Torah mitzvahs. Doesn't matter what level. Doesn't matter how old they are and how long it took them to get there. They should be so thankful they have the opportunity to listen to classes, to keep mitzvahs, to do what they need to do. That's what they should be so thankful. Everything else is a distraction. I agree. It's probably a good distraction, right? It's probably something that makes us not want to get out of bed every day. I get it. Makes perfect sense. That's what God wants. He wants you to learn from the lessons. He wants you to grow. He wants you to draw close. He wants you to stay away from things you're not supposed to do, even if you think it's a good thing to do. Right? He wants you to serve him with everything you got every single day. That's what he wants, no matter what happens. You're going to say that's a very tall order. It is. Right? That was easy. 100%, it's a very tall order. But what would a person rather have? Fantasy? You know, people living for football, Super Bowl, Sunday, this, that. That's fantasy. People want fantasy because life is too hard. We say you're right. Life is hard. We have trials. God gave us Torah. God gave us the antidote. The antidote is Torah. The antidote is doing mitzvahs. The antidote is knowing what I'm doing here. That's the antidote. Then you have to go out and do it. That's a lot harder. That's a heck of a lot more difficult. Okay, we take it one step at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day. I have to learn. I have to work on myself. I have to be prepared for everything. So I know how to work on my character traits and never be surprised by the evil inclination. But you know what? It doesn't always work that way either. Evil inclination has many ways to trap us, different things. We have to have our heads screwed on tight. We have to look at the world like the world is cracked, even though we have to survive in this world. We have to live in this world. We have to speak to people that don't hold our values. Okay? Right? A lot of things that are thrown our way that, you know, it's like going through an obstacle course. Okay? You know, but at the end of the day, what do you want? We want everything to be easy. We want to be sipping pina coladas. Nobody has that. Nobody has that today. Nobody will have that. Right? It's about struggle. It's about trials. And it's about 100% belief in God that he runs the world. He's in charge. That's the mantra. And if we live with that mantra, doesn't matter what happens around us. What happens around us is irrelevant. The only question is how I deal with it. Right? That's the message. Right? That's the message we should take home. I didn't get to the other part I wanted to get to, but I'm going to stop here. Let me see if there are any other questions. Someone asked, the greater the test and pain, the greater the reward in heaven. Right? Right? The greater the test, hopefully we overcome the test. If we overcome the test, then 100%. The greater the test, the greater reward. Someone points out the world's gotten worse, the more people come into Torah. You're right. There are more people coming to Torah mitzvahs. The problem is the level of scholarship, even though there are more people learning today more than in the Second Temple period, the level of scholarship is way down. But yeah, there are a lot of issues also. Not, you know, I'm not gonna say it's all hunky-dory. You know, it's all very smooth. It's true. You know, there are more people coming to Torah mitzvahs. The problem is, in the early 1990s, there was a study done saying that we're losing 35,000 Jews a year to assimilation into marriage. 35,000. I would think the number is much higher today. So even with the Jews coming back to Judaism and converts, you know, etc., we're still losing tens of thousands more. So it's true. There's a lot of good things going on. It's not all bad, right? It's definitely not all doom and gloom. There is a lot of good. That I agree. But if you look in the bigger scheme of things, you got 13 million Jews don't know anything about Judaism. They've all assimilated, and you know a lot of them intermarried. So for them, it's game over spiritual. So you're right. The ones who are gaining and growing and coming to Torah mitzvahs is tremendous, but you're losing 90%. Right? You know, you see the flip side also. Right? I'm very good at looking at the negative. Very easy to look at the negative. Right? There is positive. I'm not going to say no. There is a lot of positive. You have communities growing by leaps and bounds, yeshivas, girls' schools, kashrus, other things. Tremendous all over the world. Right? It's unbelievable. You know, at the same time, you're losing tens of thousands a year. You know, so you can't have one without the other. Where you have the greatest of, like here in Israel, you have the greatest amount of spirituality, greatest amount of Torah being learned here, right? But you have the greatest amount of impurity also at the same time. So they offset, so to speak, because you're not going to have one without the other, right? So, you know, the evil inclination run wild. people get lost spiritually, but you have people coming back, you have converts, you have people growing in Torah mitzvahs, people having 7, 8, 10, 12 kids, whatever it is, building Torah homes. Tremendous. On the flip side, you get 13 million Jews don't know anything, right? As I said before, like a potato farmer in Idaho. That's, what was the important question they may ever ask in their lifetime about ketchup or mustard on my hot dog. That's where they're holding. That's where most Jews are holding today. There is good. I'm not going to say not. There is tremendous amount of good. Right, but at the same time, you're losing a lot. You can't say all the goodness without saying, there's negativity on the other side of, right? You have it both ways. But, if the 1990s, you're losing 35,000 Jews a year, 35,000, probably up to 50 or 60 today at least, right? That's 30 years ago. So you're losing, how many people become religious and convert during the year? During a year, 1,000, maybe. I don't even know if it's that high. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but you're still losing a lot more than you're gaining. Right? I don't know what the stats are, but you're losing a lot more than you're gaining. But we are gaining. There's in other ways. That's definitely true. You have to see both sides. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asked, what are you going to say to a religious Jew in Israel who is depressed? I don't know. Tell them the alternative is always worse. They'll say, well, I'd rather die. Well, then don't say that. Someone who's depressed, it's hard. Depends, why they're depressed. Then they're always depressed. I always say that, sometimes I get myself in a funk, and, I have this MP3 of Purim music. Now, I usually play it only during Purim, but sometimes, a person gets in a funk. I sometimes blast that music. Now, it doesn't always work. Right? That doesn't always work, but it just puts you in a certain frame of mind. Exercise is good. Yoga might be good. Torah thoughts may be good, but, we got to think about the positive. I would say, tell that person, write 10 things that they're thankful for. Make a list. 10 things they're thankful for. They're alive. They can breathe. They're healthy, relatively speaking, or God forbid if they're not. Whatever, 10 things they're thankful for. And then when they're depressed and they're having a hard time, look at that list. Now, they may burn the list. They may crumble it up. They may throw it away. But before they do that, if they look at the list, they realize what we're thinking is very petty, right? It's very shallow in different ways. And we can be very shallow, very petty, at the same time. But we don't think about what we have. We don't think about the goodness. Yeah, this is hard. That's hard. But what about the goodness? What about the fact I'm relatively healthy? I can breathe. I can do things on my own. The Vilna Gaon used to send his students who were suffering tremendously from poverty. He used to send them on Friday to the hospital to visit people. They came into Shabbos very different. Not that they had much food, but at least they could take care of themselves. They weren't in a hospital bed. They're totally thankful that they're alive. The alternative is worse. I don't think there's any question, but you got to think about what we have, the good things that we have, and focus on the good. Problem is, it's very easy to focus on the bad. When you're going through it and it's very hard and the person's on their knees and they're suffering different ways, it's very hard to think about the good. Very hard to think about the good. But I know stories of so many people that had it so hard and so difficult and this and that, and they were just happy every day. How? Because they psych themselves up so much. They had so much to be thankful for. So much to be thankful for. Problem is, we complain at the littlest things and then we get in the funk. Right? I don't think music is always the answer. I think it helps. Could help. Exercise could help. It's clearing the mind, going for a walk. I don't know. If it's too cold out, you can't do that. I don't know. I think writing things down that you're thankful for, really thankful for. If you write down 10, right, I would just say 10 things and put it somewhere. put that piece of paper somewhere. When a person's in a funk, think about what you have to be thankful for. Now, sometimes the person can get very upset, very angry, very depressed, whatever it is, and these things aren't going to change a person's mind. Might not. But, you got to think about what we're thankful for. So many things to be thankful for. So many. Fear. How do you overcome fear? You say the mantra 100 times a day. God, you're the one in charge. People had fear. Certainly at the beginning of Corona, no one's afraid of it now. Seemingly, if they had the vaccine, didn't have the vaccine, whatever. People afraid to go out, people afraid to do anything, right? You're not allowed to be afraid. Right? The only thing you're allowed to be afraid of is if, God forbid, you might forget Torah. That's what you're allowed to be afraid of. But if God runs the world and God's the one in charge, so what do I have to be worried about? If something's supposed to happen to me, it'll happen, no matter what I do. Right? Person, may be in, financial dire straits, or financial straits, whatever. You got bills to pay, where money's coming from, okay. You got to put your best foot forward. But at the same time, the mantra is God's the one in charge. That takes away fear. Because then you got somebody, the big boss, a friend of mine would say. He's the big boss. He can change anything at any time. He's got the ability to change anything at any time. But we get caught up. We get caught up in all this stuff. There are things that I'll tell you, like, my own personal life, I could have just thrown in the towel and just said, got beaten down this way, that way, the other way. It's like a sledgehammer. Bam, 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 bam. You know what? I still got up in the morning. I still prayed. And I said, I had good days, I had bad days. I'm not going to say not. Some days are just unbearable in certain ways. Okay. It wasn't always bad. It certainly wasn't always bad. But you know what? I was just determined. Okay. You've been thrown to the wolves. The only place you can go is up. And hopefully you're not going to suffer more and you get the message. And then you get slammed again and again. Okay, I didn't get the message. In a certain way, pets are, maybe good for that, but, no problem with pets in general, but I'm not going to go into it now. Certain issues with pets, but, for some people, what clears their mind is music. Music's a good thing if it's kosher music. Yoga, not necessarily a bad thing, right? Exercise, going for a walk, going to see nature, if it's not freezing out, depending where you are. There are a lot of things to try and clear the mind, right? There's not, I have to tell you from Torah perspective, per se, but it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy, but our mentality, bottom line is our mentality has to change. If you don't change your mentality, you just get more depressed, and you'll never get out of bed. Right? That's really the bottom line. Volunteering, that's a good idea. It's also a good idea. Doing chesed, that's what I mentioned. Doing acts of loving kindness. That you're helping others. You're helping others, also tremendously. You feel you're giving to somebody. Instead of you feel like you're being put down or whatever, you're helping others. Makes you feel good about yourself. When a person feels good about themselves, they don't think about bad things necessarily until it comes up. I always say, whenever I feel like I'm on the top of the mountain, whatever, and things are going so good, I always know there are certain people I can talk to. They'll knock me down. They'll knock me down to where I should be, right? So I always know, the people you want to get slapped upside the head by, there are people you can talk to, right? There are definitely people you can talk to, but when a person's feeling good, you try and stay on that equilibrium. But the problem is that something else hits you, and something, you don't hold on to it for very long. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes the person on a high for a certain amount of time, and then something else happens, something goes, something this. It's hard, right? And it's definitely hard. And a person can't study all day. It's also hard. Right? A person may have to take a break, this, that. Okay, right? There's only so much, necessarily the brain can take. If someone's a machine, they can sit and learn for long periods of time. Good. If not, I would say like this: person feels they have it hard. Read the Book of Psalms. No one had it harder. Very few people had it harder than King David himself. and he had 100% faith in God. God's going to take care of his needs, even if he doesn't deserve it, blah, blah, blah. You don't hear him complain. He had a lot to complain about. He had a very difficult life. You look what he went through and you say, wow, what I'm going through is nothing compared to that. Right? Everything's relative to the generation. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I'm gonna stop there. I just every Tuesday and Thursday. Every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. I am going to be doing, I think, Tanakh talk in an hour and change, and then at 12:30 Eastern time, and then hopefully no hidations at 2:30 Eastern time, and the no hide laws. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com. Wish you have a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, depending where you are, and everyone have a great rest of the week.